On today's show, Spencer Dinwiddie comes home to mama. And it's actually a really big problem for the Mavericks. But it's a good one. And I'll tell you why. Today is Locked On Mavs.
I'm Luka Doncic, and this is Locked On Mavericks podcast.
If you don't believe, you shouldn't be here.
You are Locked On Mavs.
Great, Rusty.
Your daily Dallas Mavericks podcast.
No one's dying.
Part of the Locked On Podcast Network.
Amazing.
Your team every day.
Still can't even help me.
And welcome. You are locked on to the Dallas Mavericks. My name is Nick Angstadt, media member and NBA channel manager of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day. Thanks for being part of the show, making Locked On Mavs your first listen today. With the best way to help us grow the show is to listen every day, leave a 5-star review on any podcast platform, like the video on YouTube, comment anything below. Just comment anything below. Comment about if you've had a terrible plane situation this weekend, because I sure did. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more as playoffs wind down. The sport stops sporting like we want them to. This summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a daily boost or bonus. Daily, that's right. There's something for everyone every day all summer long. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. It's FanDuel.com. Today, I'm back. I'm back from vacation, and I traveled longer than I was actually gone on vacation. The planes are nuts. I do not recommend flying right now. I had 4 flights planned. I had a flight that was supposed to take me to, connecting flight, and then the flight that was supposed to take me to my destination, and then I had a flight that was supposed to take me connecting on the way back, and a flight that was supposed to take me home. So 4 flights, 3 cancellations, 3 delays. We had a medical emergency stop in one of them. So I was flying to the Dominican Republic. We flew from Dallas. We were supposed to fly to Philadelphia. That one got canceled. And then we're flying Dallas to the Dominican Republic. We stopped in Jacksonville, Florida to let a passenger off. He seemed to be okay and everything. So glad that happened. Or glad that they fixed it all and everything worked out for that. But we stopped, and I ended up spending the night in the airport, and that's why we didn't have an episode last night. And just absolutely insanity is happening right now with airports and airlines. So hopefully all of you have had better experiences than I've had. But let's just say I'm happy to be back. That's right. Let it ride. Let it ride for being home. Oh my gosh. 25 hours I spent today. And when I got off the plane, I start going through the lobby, and I ended up landing in Love Field. And I usually don't land in Love Field, but I landed in Love Field, and all of a sudden at the end of the hallway, there's the Welcome to Dallas banner, and then there's this big pillar of Luka, Kyrie, Lively, and it just welcomes you home. Felt good. Felt good to see the Pillar Mavs. Today, we'll talk about Spencer Dinwiddie. We'll talk about his return to the Dallas Mavericks. Why did he come home to mama? And he actually represents a big problem for the Mavericks now. But it's a pretty good problem to have, so we'll talk about that. Let's start here. Spencer Dinwiddie. He's back with the Dallas Mavericks. We talked about this for a while. We've talked about how the Mavs needed to add somebody with that 15th roster spot. They had a bunch of different needs that they could have filled. I did a whole episode about, was it Dinwiddie or should it be Dennis Smith Jr.? Should it be Marcus Morris? All that kind of stuff. But I think that the thing that is great about this, and I was always a Dinwiddie guy from the beginning, is the Mavericks needed another ball handler. They just needed another guy. They just needed one more guy that can handle the ball, because Luka and Kyrie are going to miss time. They just are. It's one of those things where, like, Kyrie has played a decent amount of games, but he missed a bunch of games last season, and Dante Exum had to step up in a big way. Luka Doncic just went through a really tough physical season where you go, man, I hope that he's okay, like going into next season. We hope that he just bounced back. He's 25 years old. Hopefully that his body just bounces back in a way, but they're going to need somebody to fill in and step in. And even step in possession sometimes, because we saw in the finals, they just needed one more ball handler, one more ball creator, one more shooter, one more person. Guess what? They got one more ball creator and one more shooter in Dinwiddie and Klay Thompson. And adding somebody like Dinwiddie just takes the pressure off of everyone else a little bit more. Does he change your world? Probably not. But at least he changes a bunch of like little things throughout the way, your journey to the end. Like, would he change stuff in the finals? I'm not sure. I'm not sure he plays a ton in a finals situation. He might. if he gets back to the 2022 Spencer Dinwiddie that we saw with the Mavericks, where he outplayed Brunson a lot of the time, in a bunch of games in that 2022 run. He scored 30 points in Game 7 against the Suns. He almost played Brunson even in the Warriors series too. But I love the addition of Spencer Dinwiddie. He's a 6'6 guard. So if you don't remember Spencer Dinwiddie on the Mavericks, he played very recently. He played two different seasons, but half of both of those seasons, the weird Tyson Chandler weird thing that the Mavs have, where they have all these players that play like separate stints, like different stints, but then they're only half seasons. He'll probably get traded next season and it'll happen again. But Spencer Dinwiddie, 6'6 guard. He can play on or off the ball. So he can play with Luka, can play with Kyrie, can play with Klay Thompson, can play with Dante Exum, can play with Jaden Hardy, which is very important because I don't think that Dennis Smith Jr. could have played with all those guys in that same way because of the size that Dinwiddie brings, the shooting that he's going to bring that we'll talk about, because of the attacking and playmaking that he can bring. I think that he is a specific type of player that you can only get with this veteran minimum. This is a 1-year deal for Spencer Dinwiddie. The Mavs only have the minimum to give to him. And so he chose the Mavs. He could have gone back to the Lakers. And that's another thing that we probably should talk about is the Mavs got another free agent instead of the Lakers. If you count Kyrie last year, definitely Klay Thompson this year, and then Spencer Dinwiddie this year, the Mavs have gotten 3 free agents instead of the Lakers, which is, if you're a Mavs fan, it's pretty cool. It's pretty cool. He's going to be 31 years old, so he's not past his prime. He's not, he's probably at the end of his prime here. And the Mavs aren't going to ask too much of him. At the beginning of the 2022-2023 season, he was starting with Luka and was the Brunson replacement. And the same way that the Nuggets are going to try to replace Kentavious Caldwell-Pope with Christian Brown, they're like, all right, we'll place 1-to-1. The Mavs tried to replace Brunson with Dinwiddie, just bring him off the bench or bring him into the starting lineup off the bench and then roll with it. It did not work that well for the Mavericks. Dinwiddie did all right, but it didn't fill the void because it didn't fill the talent gap, because then all of a sudden your bench is people forget about Frank. Spencer Dinwiddie also represents somebody that can attack the basket. He can shoot the three. He's was great at hitting threes for Dallas. It was something that it was just kind of mind-boggling actually, is that he shot 40% on threes in 76 games for Dallas in the two separate seasons he played. He shot almost 42% on threes in the 18 playoff games in the 2022 run that the Mavericks went on. And he actually did shoot 39% in 28 games for the Lakers. So it's not only a Dallas thing. If it was, maybe it'd be fine. But maybe Dinwiddie figured out something with his three-point percentage, because he was not a great three-point shooter to start his career for Detroit or even for Brooklyn early on when he was playing well for them. And so Dinwiddie brings a shooter the Mavs need. He brings a capable ball handler and a guy that can add something to the Mavericks, take some pressure off of some of these guys that we just talked about. He's a guy that can knock down a three for the Mavericks, and that's huge because that's different than what Dennis Smith Jr. could bring. Dennis Smith Jr. is not going to knock down threes for you, and so I think this was the right play for the Mavericks to make. And he's a guy that will actually play. He's a guy that will come in and get minutes. I think that we'll start looking at the Mavs depth chart here a little bit later, but he's a guy that's definitely going to play for you. It makes Dante Exum and Jaden Hardy a little bit more expendable and makes them a little bit more. It buys Jaden Hardy some time. We'll talk about the roster and all that and how it affects that. But bringing in Spencer Dinwiddie, I think, gives you a lot of things. It helps you in a bunch of different areas. It takes pressure off a bunch of different people. But coming up, let's talk about how Spencer Dinwiddie will help Luka. Let's talk about how he'll help Kyrie. And there's one specific thing that he does that he adds to the Mavs that they just desperately needed. And we'll talk about that coming up.
If you don't believe, you shouldn't be here.
Today's episode is brought to you by eBay Motors. Passion, drive, patience. It's the formula for winning championships. It's also what keeps eBay Motors, keeps your ride or die alive. Go check it out and see what is available for you. They got superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, all kinds of things that you can use to level up your vehicle, maintain it, all kinds of stuff like that. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. You get your money back if it doesn't fit the first time. It's pretty cool. You don't have to just try it on and do all that. It's pretty cool. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber and not cash. With the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home huge wins. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay guaranteed fit only available to U.S. customers. Thanks everybody for hanging out with me on Locked On Mavs, being part of the show, part of the Raccoon Squad, listening every day. Appreciate each and every one of you for checking out the show. If you want to support the show, text me, get text alerts from me, and all kinds of stuff. I'll be doing some extra content throughout the summer. When I'm not on vacation, when I'm not stuck in an airport, I'll be doing some extra. Subscribe to the subtext. Click the link in the description. Text the number 214-643-8637. Help support the show, and you get some extra content there and alerts and all kinds of rumors I'll send you and all kinds of things like that. All right, we're talking about Spencer Dinwiddie. He signed with the Mavericks on a one-year deal. He brings a bunch of things that the Mavericks desperately needed. He brings some size that I think is great at the guard spot. I mentioned why that's important. He can play with a bunch of different players. He is 6'6". He's listed at 6'5", but he's taller than that. I've stood next to him. I've watched him play with guys, and you're like, he's taller than Josh Green. Like he's just, he is. So the Mavs all of a sudden have these guards that are just big. Luka 6'7", Clay 6'6", Dinwiddie 6'6". Exum 6'5", Quentin Grimes 6'5", Jaden Hardy 6'5". Like you've got a bunch of guards that all of a sudden have some size. The only player that's shorter than 6'5" on the Mavericks is Kyrie Irving still, and then Brandon Williams on the two-way for right now. But he had some size for sure. And the thing that he brings that the Mavs desperately need is he can drop 20 if you need him to. The Mavs just didn't have that guy. The third heat. What's the Tracy Jordan? I am the third heat. Like he brings that. The Mavs didn't have that. And we think that Klay Thompson can be that a little bit, right? Like we think that.
Still can't leave me open.
Correct. We think Klay Thompson can be that, but he doesn't do that if Luka and Kyrie are not there probably. Unless the Mavs really open their playbook and really change what they do next year, which I expect them to do. I expect them to change their playbook a little bit so that they can manufacture and take advantage of some Klay Thompson catch and shoots and running off screens and things like that, where it doesn't take a Luka Kyrie pound the rock, then create an open shot for him. Klay Thompson can get open himself. That is a thing that the Mavericks have needed really badly. So somebody that can get open themselves. That has that gravity, that has the gravity that you can't lose him, right? Like
still can't leave me open.
Yes. He can drop 20. He had 7 games of 20-plus points last season for both Brooklyn and 1 for the Lakers. He had a bunch for the Mavericks. I think he had 23 in 2022, 23 for the Mavericks in the regular season. He obviously had some for the Mavericks in the playoffs. He is a guy that comes in and like, all right, we don't need you to score 20 points every game. But what Tim Hardaway did last year was very helpful for the Mavericks. As much as we want to bemoan Tim Hardaway and say, oh, we're so glad that he's gone and all that stuff. Like they needed his 17 points a game where he would score 25 one game and 5 the next. When he scored 25, they needed that 25. And Dinwiddie can do that. So now you have Luka, who had 65 20-point games last season. Kyrie had 46. Tim Hardaway Jr. had 17. But now you replace him with Klay Thompson. Then you bring in Spencer Dinwiddie. You've also still got PJ that I think is going to have some moments where he knocks down a bunch of threes or does some stuff. And then you've got Derek Lively, who is probably going to have some games as well because of him taking advantage and things like that. So I'm excited to see what he brings. I'm excited to see what he brings to the table, and we'll see how he fits. But I think that him just being a threat to score 20 points and being able to step in that moment is going to be absolutely massive for the Dallas Mavericks. The other thing that I think Spencer Dinwiddie brings to the Mavericks that they really need is part of their identity is low turnovers. He does not turn the ball over that much. He only had a 10% turnover rate in both 2023 and 2021, and he had an over 20% usage percentage, which is not high, but it's a big usage. So he has the ball a lot. He doesn't turn the ball over that much, and I think that's something that the Mavericks, it's part of their identity. Parts of last year before the Mavs made the trades for PJ Washington and Daniel Gafford, they said, Jason Kidd would say the thing like, hey, our offense is our defense. Us not turning the ball over, not giving up open possessions, easy possessions, fast break possessions, and all that. That's what keeps us in games. And so Spencer Dinwiddie having a low turnover rate, I think is something that is a positive for the Mavericks. You got to take that and say, man, like this is something he fits our identity. And it's, one of the reasons why this is such a clean fit is because he already knows how to come and play in the Mavericks system. He can play next to a guy like Kyrie, like Luka, because he's played next to He's played next to Jalen Brunson. He's played next to Luka, obviously. And I think that that's something that is huge. So that turnover thing is something that I haven't seen anybody mention that I think is kind of important, is that he's not a high percentage turnover guy. It's probably because he's not like a huge playmaker guy. He's taking a bunch of shots himself if he's going to get the ball. But it's still a positive that you'll take. The one more thing that I think he brings to the table that's a kind of like a devalued thing, but it's mattered because you can't really quantify it, is that he steps up in big moments. He was a riser in the playoffs for the Mavericks. I mentioned he played almost even with Brunson in the Golden State Warriors series in the Western Conference Finals. Brunson took 20 more shots. He played 32 more minutes than Dinwiddie, almost a whole game more. And Brunson only had 7 more points and only 2 more assists in the whole series, all 5 games combined. He took 20 more shots, played 30 more minutes, but only scored 7 more points and only 2 more assists than Dinwiddie. Dinwiddie produced in the playoffs and the Mavs needed it. He stepped up, and I think that's something that is absolutely huge. He hit the game winner against the Brooklyn Nets. You remember that play? That was a massive one. Everybody's going for Luka. You need somebody to take advantage. You need somebody to find an advantage for you. You need somebody to take a shot. All right. Now all of a sudden, think about that 2022-23 roster. It was Luka and Dinwiddie, and that was kind of it. Or maybe Tim Hardaway. Now you choose between, all right, you're going to guard Luka, you're going to guard Kyrie, you're going to guard Clay, you're going to guard Dinwiddie, you're going to guard Lively at the rim, you're going to guard PJ in the court. Like, what are you going to do? Who are you going to leave open? And that is a huge thing too. So taking pressure off again, but the Nets game winner, don't forget huge shots like that. He had 30 points in the game 7 against the Suns. He played better than Brunson in that game. That was a huge moment. He steps up in these big moments. And I think that's big. And he's a vet, and they'll ask him to play some big minutes one night and not play big minutes the next night. And I think that's something that he's got to come to grips with. The Lakers should have given him some bigger minutes, and he didn't necessarily earn them and kind of got benched at the end of that run. And so now he's going to have to show that he can play those minutes. And so Dinwiddie brings a lot of good things. We talked about all the good that Spencer Dinwiddie brings. I think that this is all positives. There's one drawback, though. The problem that Spencer Dinwiddie creates for the Mavericks is an interesting one. Let's talk about that and more coming up.
If you don't believe, you shouldn't be here.
Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. FanDuel Sportsbook is all kinds of props and odds and things that you can use to get in on the action. There's bonuses and boosts daily for anyone that wants to go check out what is available for you. They got futures for the NBA, but they always have daily stuff. They've got Olympics. Oh, let's see what they got for men's archery. Oh, are the Koreans really going to sweep archery? three Korean archers, the men's division, plus 430, plus 470, plus 500. Brazilian Olympian is plus 650. From Turkey is plus 850. Italy plus 1200. Where's the first U.S. Brady Ellison? Plus 1600. Huge play right there. Archery. We've got Robin Hood. We've got. I guess we don't have Legolas, right? That doesn't count. We've got Katniss Everdeen. We've got Hawkeye. We've got a legacy of archers here in the U.S. Take home the gold, Brady. You can go bet on it if you want to at FanDuel.com. All kinds of other stuff too. Check it out at FanDuel.com.
Shut it down! Let's go home!
I went in on archery in the ad read. If you skipped it, I gave all my archery knowledge. All right, let's talk about the one drawback that Spencer Dinwiddie brings. It's a big task now for Jason Kidd. The Mavs depth chart looks beautiful. I'm not going to lie. You look at it, and I don't know if you're this type of person, but I am. When I was a kid, and even not as a kid, even as an adult, when free agency would happen and the draft was done and all the rosters were starting to settle, I would sit down and I would write down all the depth charts that I thought were their depth charts for each team, just to give me I needed to visually see all the teams together to give me an idea of how these teams changed, what they look like now, imagine how they would play then, and all that. And I would sit down and write them. And I still do this for the Mavericks, and I keep a running one that I adjust when I see minutes adjusted and things like that, or a trade happens or somebody gets signed. And you start to look at the Mavs depth chart, and you just look at it and you go, man, they're pretty solid. And they got some interesting wild cards in the third depth spot. You start with the starters, guard, wing, and big. Luka, Kyrie, Clay, PJ Washington Jr., Derek Lively II. Solid. It's a solid starting lineup. Probably going to be one of the best in basketball next season if Clay fits the way that I hope that he does. If PJ Washington takes a step forward, if Lively takes a step forward, it could be the best one in basketball for sure. One of the best in basketball. Then coming off the bench, you've got another starting lineup group. Dinwiddie at a guard, Quentin Grimes at the other guard, Najee Marshall at one wing, Maxey at the other wing, and Daniel Gafford. Take out Maxey and replace him with Dante Exum. Move Najee Marshall to the 4. You can do that. Jaden Hardy, same thing with him. Put him as another guard. There's a lot of different things. But all of a sudden, that second group of Dinwiddie, Grimes, Najee Marshall, Maxey, and Gafford. And I know that some of you bemoan Maxey still on the team. He's still going to be a solid backup playing, 10 minutes, 12 minutes a night. He can still bring you some stuff and play some solid defense, and that's kind of what you want from a backup 4. Spread the floor a little bit. Knock down a 3 here or there. But all of a sudden, this depth chart is solid. Nico Harrison's done a great job. Tomorrow, Slightly Biased and I will talk about the job that Nico Harrison has done. But, man, you look at what he's done and you go, oh, man, all of a sudden Jason Kidd's going to have a task on his hand. And this is the one problem with Spencer Dinwiddie, is that now all of a sudden you've got some mouths to feed. The Mavericks have been searching and desperately looking for mouths to feed. Can we get somebody that wants to throw up shots? Can we get somebody that wants to take possessions? Can we get somebody that wants to take away from Luka, that is worthy of taking some possessions away from Luka? And they just haven't had that. And now all of a sudden you bring in Kyrie. Oh, great. Him take away possessions from Luka, and Luka had one of his lowest usage percentages. Now you bring in Clay. Okay, he can take some possessions away from Luka, even if it's just a catch and shoot or he's running around or whatever. Sometimes I feel like I talk about Clay like he's just not a playground running around the jungle gym. Clay's just running around over there. He's running around screens and he's doing all that, and then he's they'll run some plays for him, and then all of a sudden that takes away some Luka's usage. And now you got Dinwiddie, plus PJ, plus Lively, plus Gafford, plus what Najee Marshall can bring, plus what Grimes can bring, plus what Exum can bring, and Hardy. And all of a sudden you're like, oh my gosh, some of these guys are just going to get completely walled off from playing time. Teams do not play like an 11, 12-man rotation. As much as we'd want, we've got the top 10 with Dinwiddie, Grimes, Najee, Maxey, Gafford, plus the starting lineup. And then for sure, Hardy's got to get his minutes. Oh, they've got to play Exum. Omax has got to get his minutes for development. They don't do that. That doesn't happen. Guys will miss games, and so other guys will play. And so you can do the whole thing that I do every year where I go through and I'm like, all right, let me try and predict the minutes to see where everything falls and do all that. And you can try to do that. And at the end of the year, it will look differently because guys will play more minutes in games that other guys sit out and all that. But there's going to be a squeeze on this roster, and somebody's not going to be happy. Dinwiddie could sit out games. There could be games where Dinwiddie doesn't play, and it's fine. They need some extra defense, so they bring in Exum instead. They need some extra, energy or legs or some kind of offensive jolt, and so it's Hardy instead of Dinwiddie possibly. They have moments where it's going to be Luka and Clay in the backcourt, and then all of a sudden it's like, all right, now you're squeezing your guard group of Luka, Kyrie, Dinwiddie, Exum, Hardy. Like that group gets squeezed a little bit because you can play, these lineups more versatily. Grimes can play 2, Clay can play 2, Kyrie obviously, Hardy, Exum, Dinwiddie. Like they can all play 2 and 1, and they can move all around. And this kind of roster flexibility is going to make it so that it's going to be hard for Jason Kidd to figure out, all right, how do we keep all these guys happy? And how do we make it work for the Mavericks? And how do they balance that? I think it could be a problem. But I think the Mavs chemistry is going to be tested a little bit. There's some new guys coming in. Clay, Dinwiddie, Grimes, Najee, and they seem to all be good culture guys. Dinwiddie fit in really well. Clay has fit in well with the Warriors, and it was the end of that time there. Najee has been a good role player for the Pelicans, seemed to fit in. Everyone seems to love him, and he defends everyone. He fights for people. Grimes didn't like it in Detroit, but it seemed from all sides seemed it to be a good time in New York, and that he loved being there. And then he got replaced by Dante DiVincenzo in the starting lineup. And so you're like, all right. And then the rest of the guys were on the team last year with amazing chemistry. And so you introduce those new guys, and how is that new chemistry going to fit and all that? But the chemistry could hold this up. And they'll need to, all right, we've all got to sacrifice a little bit. Luka probably sacrifice some counting stats so that Dinwiddie can get some runs, so that Clay can get some shots. That they didn't have guys last year that were taking those. Maybe Tim Hardaway. Kyrie is probably going to sacrifice a little bit gladly. I think Kyrie's going to be okay to sacrifice somewhere. He doesn't have to go off every night. Clay will definitely have to sacrifice from last year. And he talked about that in his introductory press conference. He said, I'm ready to come in and sacrifice and know what it takes to win and do all that. And so I think it's going to be interesting to see how Jason Kidd handles this. I think this is the problem the Mavericks will run into, is that you just have a bunch of options. You have a bunch of dudes, and you can't play 10, 11, 12 guys every single night. Not every night can be the first game of the 22-23 season where every single player on the roster played. Remember that all 15 players played? Can't be like that every night. You just can't. You've got to have some consistency. You've got to have guys get in a rhythm, and you can't just be bringing one guy in and taking him off and taking him in and taking him off and taking him away and taking him off. Like, it just doesn't work like that. So I'm fascinated how Jason Kidd does this. I'm fascinated to see how he handles it. I think I've seen some people on Twitter and other places say Jason Kidd, he's got to figure out the depth chart by night one. He's got to know who's going to play and who's not. That is not Jason Kidd. That is not how Jason Kidd has operated. I think it will take a while. I think it'll be frustrating for some of you. I think there'll be a lot for us to talk about throughout the season, especially the beginning of the season, because he's going to experiment. He's going to try. He's going to try Dinwiddie and Exum as the backcourt. He's going to try Kyrie and Grimes, Luka and Najee Marshall, Luka and Clay, Kyrie and Clay. He's going to try all kinds of different backcourts and combinations and things like that. He's going to try PJ at the 5, hopefully. He's going to try Najee at the 4 instead of Maxey. He's going to try a bunch of different things. The one thing he will not try, though, is Lively and Gafford together. Some of you have got to end that campaign. It's just not going to work out. But that's the problem that the Mavericks have with Dinwiddie. It's an amazing problem to have. It's the best problem the Mavericks could have at this point, is that they have the deepest team in the Luka Doncic era. And now they have to figure out how to feed all the mouths, how to make everything work, how to keep everybody happy. The Mavs chemistry will be tested, but they had amazing chemistry last year. I'm excited to see where it is. And there you go. Guys, thanks for hanging out with me. I'm Locked On Mavs. We'll be back tomorrow. Slightly Biased will be here with me. We'll talk about what Spencer Dinwiddie brings to the team. We'll talk about the mama versus dad quote. We'll talk about all that. And we'll talk about how Nico Harrison completely changed this roster. Guys, thanks so much for listening to Locked On Mavs.
Peace out.
Boom!